This wasn't going to be an in-depth video, but after diving into it, this warrants one. For the most part, I've been off the cartoon scene for the last couple years. There wasn't anything too fantastic in my eyes airing, and I didn't see anything happening anytime soon. I left, got more into anime, and found some great works. Recently, I've developed back into it, and found all of the great shit I've been missing. The bonds of two brothers as they encounter a variety of scenarios are tested on their journey to find a way out of the woods. Each episode on some level tackles some idea through the environmental storytelling and through the dialogue between the main crew. Magic is abound, the darkness is looming around every corner, and the beast has manifested into your worst nightmare. I'm going to be taking a look at the animated masterpiece that deals in the unknown over the garden wall. This show defines what it means to defy expectations. Every episode there's always something that could be misinterpreted by appearances. The fiancé stuck in the gorilla suit, the haggard old lady in her own way trying to help a possessed maiden, the town of pumpkin-wearing skeletons, Greg trying his best to help Wirt, and Wirt assuming his crush is into someone else. He assumes so much. He thinks he knows what's best, but by the end, he doesn't. His stubbornness, this form of pride, clouds his judgment to the detriment of those around him. At its core, this is a story about one brother learning to get over his mental issues and blocks he has on himself. Everyone goes through this journey in some way during their lifetime, and for a short miniseries, it encapsulates what that long journey looks like. When you're writing a story about someone's journey, whether it be a physical or a psychological one, it's important to establish what the end means for them. At first, it's presented that the end of the journey was leaving the forest, but by the end, that's not what it's about. Assuming the whole thing was a dream sequence, and the only thing he had to lose was the chance to tackle his issues. Of course, the journey could have been real, but the one part that is undeniable is that the experience did change him. Just for the sake of the video though, I'm going to be assuming it really did happen to make talking about it easier. Each episode has its own way of challenging Wirt's ideals. In the second episode, Hard Times with the Husk and Bee, Wirt and the gang almost exclusively convinced themselves of the town folks' dark nature. The pumpkin-wearing skeletons weren't exactly normal people, but they never did anything that would warrant such a response, aside from maybe their talk about not leaving the town or what Wirt judges them on, their appearance. Ultimately, Wirt prejudges them extremely in the end and is still at a point in his journey where he doesn't change from it even after learning how wrong he was. By the end of the story, after escaping the unknown, Wirt has accepted this character flaw about himself, at least in some way. He does this through his little brother Greg, who I haven't talked about yet. The reason is Greg's place in the story is kind of bizarre. By the first episode I thought they both equally be protagonists, but really the only protagonist of this story is Wirt. Greg serves the purpose of being a person close to Wirt that brings out the negative traits about him. Because of his brother's antics, Wirt's crush Sarah gets a love tape he made, which causes him to lash out at Greg. There are times obviously where Greg is getting himself into trouble and it is his fault, but this journey serves to show that a lot of Wirt's anger towards him is unfounded. Especially because of how much Greg looks up to him as a leader and respects him. The scene where Greg was trying to save his brother, though his demeanor was not tense or scared in any way, still really made me feel for the two brothers' connection to one another. Though the series does focus on the psychological journey Wirt is going on, it doesn't only showcase this. Something I immediately noticed was the art direction, the music design, and art style in relation to the story. First, the art direction. I'm not sure if this is a positive or not. Some animated works decide that artistic synergy is unnecessary. What I mean is the backgrounds and environments are all created in a highly detailed drawing style while the characters are in a less detailed cartoony design. The world Wirt and Greg travel through looks absolutely beautiful, but the characters do not share its visual style. The designs are good, but I can't help but think the visuals overall would have looked better if they all shared a similar vision. If only Wirt and Greg look different, I could at least buy that it's because of how out of place they are, but only the beast is actually made to look like he belongs in their world. That could be that the unknown only belongs to the beast, but I don't really buy that here. I think this is really where my problems lie. The characters feel like they're photoshopped in. They don't belong in their own story visually. If it's a problem of budget constraints or issues with animating something so detailed, then it would make sense, but even so I feel like this takes away from the story just a little bit. This doesn't really ruin the story or anything, it's just something that kind of nagged on at certain points of the story. Aside from that though, the art direction deserves to be praised. Through its art alone, it conveys a sense of loneliness as the world around our characters closes in on them. Everything is bigger than them, from the trees to the various characters they encounter. Each frame is some artistic drawing that's stunning. It could be the town of Pottsfield or just the forest environment itself. Everything is visually appealing. With these highly detailed environments, it sells this world that the brothers are traveling through. In a character progression journey, it helps to have just the mere act of going from place to place be enthralling. You along with the character can feel the impact of the world, almost as if you can be changed just as Wirt is. The old style backgrounds that for the most part remain motionless as the main cast moves through this artful painting of a world are just a joy to look at, every single frame. All of this serves to elevate the themes of the story and ground the viewer in the plot. Next is the music in this series, and it's really something special. It has an entirely unique soundtrack that does a variety of things for the story. It does all of its usual things such as enhancing emotional scenes, helping to direct the mood, and giving compelling ambience to the world, but also has its way of giving this old-timey feel. The two big times I felt the power the music had over me was in the phenomenal intro and when the frog sang that intro on the boat ride. The music here has the feeling of an old-age fairy tale with its played-out violin chorus to create this melancholy tone. For examples of what I'm talking about, comb through some of the tracks from the original Cinderella and Wizard of Oz. This instrumental of the violin is prevalent among both of those entire soundtracks. Aside from what it sounds like, the tracks each have their own flair to them. The song I mentioned earlier that was sung by the frog is called Into the Unknown, and it's one of the more front and center pieces. Not only is it played multiple times, but its contents connect directly to Wirt and Greg's journey. There are also some songs that are sung by the cast in the story itself, but in there not in any way professional. It's just this song from their heart. At some point, Greg's singing did become a bit annoying, but the rest of the characters each brought something enjoyable to their speaking tone performances. More and more things that bring us closer to the world they're in, closer to the unknown. Speaking of the unknown, let's talk about some of the antagonist characters. I do say antagonists with a bit of a caveat because some characters aren't truly getting in the way of our protagonist, but they do act as an opposition of sorts. The Beast has a unique position in this story. He's the looming threat for the story as a whole, and yet he never really gets any depth as a character, even though he's portrayed as one. His whole purpose, aside from being a main antagonist for the plot, is to be someone who represents the unknown, the place they exist in. The theme of the unknown is something the story never directly tackles, but does always exist. I would say that a major conflict for Wirt is dealing with his judgment of others and his outlook of only trusting himself. But another way to interpret this struggle is he is afraid of the unknown. This manifests with his uncertainty with confessing to his crush and his unwillingness to flex his plan to the current situation. The Beast himself, however, is only really in direct conflict with the Woodsman for the majority of the story. The Woodsman, who is Wirt if he gave in to his negative traits, obsessed with his desire to keep the lantern going, preserving what he thinks is his daughter's life. He is one-track minded. Everyone else around him is just a prop to his goals. He refuses to deviate at all from his ideals. All the negative traits of Wirt exist within the Woodsman. Before the start of the story, the Woodsman has been getting oil from the Edelwood trees without knowing they come from the souls of lost children. All of that time, he never questions the origin of the trees, or if his daughter really ever was inside the lantern at all. This is what makes the reveal at the end that the Beast soul is in the lantern so effective, because it's the Woodsman, the fully negative counterpart to Wirt, being released from this burden that he put on himself, being released from the mistake of listening to the Beast. The Beast as an entity exists in both the lives of the Woodsman and Wirt, which they both overcome by the end. What's the Beast's origin? Will Wirt ever return to the unknown? Well, all of that is unnecessary to what's important. Wirt's journey. All of these details I've described here came from talking about the smaller aspects of the story. Over the Garden Wall is packed with dense episodes that give you phenomenal storytelling, great artistic design and musical scores, and a message that stands alone amongst the cartoon crowd. You can't let the unknown rule you. You must be able to face it, overcome it, if you are to be rid of its influence. I hope my influence is giving you some insight into what I think makes Over the Garden Wall something I can go back to time and time again for examples for strong storytelling. Check out the playlist, subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time for my analysis on Infinity Train. Till next time.